What does it really mean to know someone? It's not just about facts, right? It's about understanding their character. And according to the sources for this explainer, getting a clear picture of God's character is, well, it's foundational to everything. So let's dive in and unpack what these texts have to say. Wow. The source material kicks things off with this incredibly powerful idea. It suggests that a huge problem in the world isn't just a lack of knowledge, but a specific misunderstanding, a darkness of misapprehension about who God is. And that idea right there really sets the stage for everything we're about to explore. So if the problem is a darkness that's caused by a big misunderstanding, then what's the solution? Well, the text proposes that the only way to fight it is to turn on the light, to get a clearer, more accurate picture of God's character. That becomes the central mission here. All right, so first let's dig into this idea of a world in darkness. The source is making a pretty bold claim here, that this darkness comes from the world losing its grip on what God's character is really like, and that has some pretty profound consequences. Okay, so where did this whole misunderstanding even begin? The source material definitely doesn't see this as some recent problem. No, it traces this darkness all the way back to a single critical moment in time, what it calls the very first lie. And here we meet the source of that misrepresentation. According to the text, the antagonist in this cosmic story, Satan, has had one central goal from the very beginning: to twist and warp how we see God's character. Now, what's fascinating here is how the source breaks down the strategy. It's like a three-step playbook. First, you plant a little seed of doubt. Did God really say that? Second, you hit them with a direct contradiction. But third, and this is the real knockout punch, you go after God's motives. You suggest he's holding out on you, keeping something good for himself. And so it all boils down to this. The source argues that the very first lie wasn't really about a piece of fruit. It was a direct hit on God's character. The hidden message was that God is secretive, kind of selfish, and when you get right down to it, you just can't trust him. And that feeling of distrust, that's the very seed of the darkness we started with. So if that's the misrepresentation, what's the truth, according to the text? Let's turn a corner here. The source starts building its case with what it presents as the absolute foundational attribute of God, his holiness. So what does holiness even mean here? The text gives a super clear definition. It's not about being standoffish or unapproachable. It means absolute moral purity, that God is completely separate from evil, 100% good, all the way through. And why that matters so much is that this purity is presented as the very reason he can be trusted. And this slide just illustrates that perfectly. I mean, think about it. An all-powerful being who wasn't perfectly good? That's basically the definition of a terrifying tyrant. An all-knowing being who wasn't perfectly good. That's a cosmic spy. According to the source, it's God's perfect goodness, his holiness, that makes all his other awesome attributes completely safe, trustworthy, and a source of comfort, not fear. And the sheer overwhelming power of this holiness is something the texts say we can barely even wrap our minds around. I mean, when people like Moses or Isaiah actually come into God's presence, their reaction isn't, "Hey, how's it going?" They are completely undone, instantly aware of their own flaws in the face of his perfect purity. Okay, a foundation of pure goodness is incredibly powerful, but the source doesn't stop there. It actually uses this foundation of holiness to reveal what it calls God's defining characteristic. So let's talk about the essence of love. Now, this is a really subtle but incredibly profound point from the book of 1 John. The text doesn't just say love is something God does. It says love is what God is. It's his very essence. It's not just one of his attributes. It's the very fabric of his being. And we're not talking about some sentimental, flimsy, greeting card kind of love here. The source points us to this Hebrew word, hesed. It's this rich, powerful term for a covenant love. A love that is fiercely loyal, protective, steady, and tender, all at the same time. It's an unbreakable commitment. So how is a love this profound actually demonstrated? Well, the source material points to this verse, maybe the most famous one in the whole Bible, as the ultimate proof. The argument is simple. Real love isn't just a feeling, it's an action. And the greatest action of all was the act of giving.
And this just brings everything to a single, incredible point. The source argues that out of all the ways an all-powerful God could have chosen to show us his character, he chose this one act, the gift of his son, as the singular, ultimate expression of his love for us.
Okay, so we've looked at holiness as the foundation and love as the very essence. So for our final section, the source brings these two massive ideas together to give us a much, much clearer picture of God's character. And this is where it all comes together so beautifully. These two attributes aren't fighting each other. They actually define each other. God's love isn't weak or selfish. It's a holy love, totally pure. And his holiness isn't cold or distant. It's a loving holiness, a goodness that is always, always acting for our benefit. They're like two sides of the same perfect coin. So we're going to end with this really interesting thought exercise from the source material. You know that famous chapter on love? Love is patient, love is kind. Try reading it again, but this time substitute the word God. God is patient. God is kind. The source suggests this isn't just poetry, but a really practical way to understand the character we've been talking about, a powerful lens for seeing who God truly is.